The Monster Within, Part 1. The forest was a choking maw of rot and shadow. Ancient trees twisted like broken spines clawing at a sky that bled perpetual twilight. Rain fell in greasy sheets, turning the ground into sucking mud that reeked of decay and old blood. Here, on this forsaken backwater world far from the dying lights of any empire, Kriakk trained. His body was a scarred monument of violence, corded muscle wrapped in pale, tattooed flesh that had never known mercy. He moved like a storm of rust and iron. Archaic weapons, crude blades of scavenged alloy hammered into jagged edges, weighted chains, and stones lashed to wooden hafts, whirled around him in brutal arcs. He smashed through living wood, the impact splintering bone deep into his shoulders. He ran weighted sprints until his lungs burned like forge fire, then dropped into endless push-ups in the filth, face grinding into the mud as thorns tore at his back. Anger fueled every strike, not the hot rage of fools, but a cold, gnawing fury. "Where is the enemy?" he snarled in his mind. "This planet is a grave of soft things. Give me something strong enough to break me, something worthy to climb over." His axe cleaved a sapling in two, spraying sap like pus. He hungered for a foe that would make his blood sing, one that could forge him sharper, meaner, more unbreakable. The galaxy had grown flaccid. He would not. Hours bled away. When his body finally screamed in protest, muscles knotted into fiery ropes, skin split and weeping, he did not rest. Kriakk's way was older than steel and older than shame. He waded into a black, freezing stream swollen with runoff, the water so cold it felt like knives flaying him alive. Barbaric. Effective. He scraped caked mud and blood from his limbs with jagged river stones, grinding them across abrasions until fresh crimson welled up to wash the filth away. No soaps, no medicines. He tore handfuls of pungent, bitter leaves from the undergrowth, plants that stung like fire ants, and crushed them into a paste, smearing it roughly over his wounds. It burned like acid, cauterizing and soothing in the old way, drawing out infection with pain. He submerged fully, holding his breath until his vision tunneled black, then erupted from the water with a guttural roar that scattered unseen things in the dark. Dripping, steaming in the chill air, he made for the cave. The burrow was his by right of conquest. Weeks earlier, the six-legged saber-tooth had claimed it, a nightmare beast of rippling fur and leathery wings folded against its flanks like tattered sails. It had dropped from the canopy with a shriek that split the night, fangs like curved daggers, claws that gouged stone. Kriakk had met it with nothing but his axe and hatred. The fight had been a slaughter of mutual ruin, wings shredding against his chains, his blade sinking into its heaving flank as it raked his chest open to the bone. Blood had painted the cave mouth in arterial sprays. In the end, he had torn out its throat with his teeth, while it still thrashed, drinking the hot gush as its 6 legs kicked their last. The carcass had fed him for days. The cave was his prize, dank, echoing, smelling of old death and wet stone. Now he returned to it, a hulking shadow stooping through the narrow entrance. A small fire pit of scavenged bones and dried dung flickered to life under his flint and steel. He dragged the half-rotted haunch of some lesser kill from the back of the cave, skewering it on a sharpened femur and holding it directly into the flames. Fat sizzled and popped, dripping into the fire. No spices, no ceremony. He ate like the caveman he was, tearing into the charred, bloody meat with his teeth, grease and juices running down his beard and scarred chest. Bones cracked between his powerful jaws, marrow sucked out with wet, obscene sounds. Hunger was a companion, never fully sated. As the fire crackled low, Kriakk leaned back against the cold rock, eyes staring into the flames. Humanity disgusted him. They grew weak the moment laziness took root, the moment comfort whispered its poison. He had walked the ruins of 100 fallen empires, towering spires of glass and steel that scraped the void, machines that wiped their asses and fed them dreams. When the power failed, when the wars came or the plagues rose, they crumbled like wet paper. Kings in their gilded thrones, presidents behind their screens, would-be gods jacked into neural thrones. They all fell the same, dependent, soft. Their technology became their chains, their comforts their graves. Kriakk spat into the fire. He hated it with every fiber of his brutal soul. A warrior did not need their crutches. A warrior was the weapon. In the dancing shadows, memories rose unbidden, grim glories from a life of endless war. The siege of Kriakk, where he had waded through waist-deep gore to split a gene-forged champion from crown to crotch. The beast pits of the outer rings, chained against abominations that dwarfed this tiger, laughing as their jaws closed on his shield and he drove steel through their eyes. Worthy foes, blood brothers in violence, dead now, most of them. The galaxy had grown quiet, filled with echoes and cowards. Kriakk gripped his axe tighter, knuckles white. This backwater world would yield something stronger, or he would break it trying. The darkness outside pressed closer, hungry as he was. The scream cut through the night like a rusted blade dragged across bone. Kriakk froze mid-chew, grease still slick on his chin, the half-gnawed haunch forgotten in his fist. It was human, young. A child's voice, raw and piercing, born not of simple pain, but of the kind of terror that hollowed out the soul. His head snapped toward the mouth of the cave, ears straining through the endless drip of the forest's rot. Another voice followed, male, broken, babbling like a man already halfway into the grave. Mercy. Gods. Mercy. Take the other one. Take the boy. He's yours. Just leave me. The wet crunch of metal shearing through thick stone echoed next, a sound like the planet's own ribs cracking. It reverberated through the trees, unnatural in its power. Then the child screamed again, high, desperate, the sound of something small, realizing the universe had no pity left for it. Real fear, the kind that preceded death, not as release, but as the final betrayal. Silence swallowed the rest. Kriakk sat motionless for 3 heartbeats, firelight painting his scarred face in flickering crimson. Strong. The word bloomed in his chest like fresh blood. Whatever had done that was no soft thing from the dying empires. No laser-scorched coward hiding behind failing machines. This was power earned in the old way. Brutal, direct, hungry. His lips peeled back from bloody teeth in something that was not quite a smile. He rose, massive frame unfolding like a waking beast, and seized his makeshift axe and the heavy wooden club studded with jagged flint and rusted nails. No hesitation, no noble delusions of rescue. He ran. Branches whipped his face and shoulders as he tore through the undergrowth, leaving shallow cuts that wept thin lines of red down his tattooed hide. Thorns clawed at his legs. Mud sucked at his bare feet. The screams had been faint, carried on the wind for who knew how long. By the time he reached the source, the killing would be long done. Good. Corpses told better truths than living tongues anyway. He cared nothing for saving the weak. But the one who had broken stone with steel, that one he would meet. That one he would test. He slowed as the trees thinned into a small clearing scarred by violence. Old wagon tracks, deep, heavy, cut into the mud. Hours old. The wagon itself was gone, but the earth remembered. Small footprints scattered away from the ruts, frantic, uneven, the desperate scurrying of a child. Kriakk followed them into the deeper woods, nostrils flaring at the copper tang of fresh blood. The boy had fallen here. A small depression in the dirt, a smear of red where a knee or elbow had struck stone. Adult prints ran parallel, longer strides, panicked. The man had not stopped to help. He had tried to outpace the child, to use the smaller body as bait, as a distraction for whatever horror pursued them. Kriakk's grip tightened on his weapons until the wood groaned. No third set of prints. Not a single one. Yet the evidence of the attacker was everywhere. Trees bore deep, savage gashes from a blade, clean cuts that bit halfway through ancient trunks, sap still oozing like pus from wounds. Further on, a boulder the size of a war shield had been sheared in two at a perfect angle, the cut impossibly smooth and powerful. Beside it lay the man, or what remained of him. His torso had been opened from collarbone to pelvis in one diagonal stroke, internal organs spilled across the forest floor in glistening ropes. Some had already been dragged away by night scavengers, small things with sharp teeth that had no fear of the dead. The man's face remained locked in a rictus of ultimate terror. Eyes wide, mouth frozen, mid-scream. Kriakk knew that look intimately. He had carved it into the faces of 1,000 lesser men. A few paces away, huddled against the base of a gnarled root, was the child. A boy, no older than 6 cycles. Tiny, malnourished, dressed in rags already soaked through with fierce sweat and mud. His eyes were open, wide, glassy, locked forever in that same abyss of terror. No wound marked his body. His heart had simply given out, unable to withstand the weight of what it had witnessed. The boy had died of fear itself, alone in the dark, while his father, or whatever the man had been, tried to abandon him. Something ancient and ugly twisted deep in Kriakk's gut. He stood over the small corpse for a long moment, rain mixing with the blood on his skin. Then, without ceremony, he began to dig. No tools, but his hands and the axe. Mud and roots tore at his fingers until they bled. But he did not stop. The boy's grave was shallow, little more than a scrape in the earth, but it was more than the forest would have given him. Kriakk laid the child down gently, more gently than his massive hands had ever moved anything, and covered him with dirt and stones. The man's body he dragged far away, hurling it into a ravine for the beasts. No honor for the coward who would sacrifice his own blood. As he worked, memories clawed their way up from the black depths of his mind. His father, a caveman chieftain of a forgotten tribe on a world long since swallowed by greater wars. Words had not yet been their tools. Strength and blood were. Yet that brutal man had shielded his whelps with axe and bone when raiders came, had stood between them and the teeth of the night. A father's duty, raw and wordless. Kriakk had never thanked him, never needed to. Protection was simply what the strong gave the young of their own blood. This nameless boy had no one, no shield, no father worth the name. The thought festered like an open wound. Kriakk rose from the fresh grave, rain streaming down his face like tears he would never shed. The anger that had always fueled him shifted, deepened. It was no longer just the hunger for a worthy foe. This was personal now. Avenge the child. Avenge the small life snuffed out because something monstrous had decided it could. Whoever, or whatever, had done this left no footprints, no trace of passage beyond the perfection of its violence. Invisible, weightless, strong beyond the crude physics of flesh. Kriakk began to hunt. The town of Eldridge Hollow was a rare, fragile bastion of warmth in a galaxy that had long forgotten such things. Nestled in a shallow valley where the endless forest met tamed fields, its timbered homes and thatched roofs huddled together like wary kin. 20 soldiers of the local levy, more farmers with spears than true warriors, kept a half-hearted watch from wooden palisades. Children laughed and chased one another through muddy streets, their bare feet slapping puddles as artisans hammered iron, carpenters planed beams, and farmers returned from the fields with baskets of meager root vegetables. It was wholesome in the way only doomed places can be. As the sun bled out across the horizon, painting the sky in bruised purples and infected reds, the town began its slow wind down. Lanterns flickered to life in windows. Mothers called children home. The watchmen coming off shift trudged toward the lone tavern, the Iron Boar, their shoulders heavy with the day's dull labor. Inside, the air was thick with smoke, ale, and the honest stink of unwashed men. Sir Aldrich Stormward, the biggest among them, dominated the room. A mountain of a man in half-plate even at rest, his beard braided with iron rings and his face scarred from old border skirmishes, he slammed his elbow onto the scarred oak table for another arm wrestling match. Coins and tankards rattled as he crushed a carpenter's hand down with a booming laugh. Knife throwing followed, his blade sinking dead center into a soot-blackened target while townsfolk cheered. Drinking games came next, horns of bitter ale downed in gulps as men roared challenges and lost their coin. Another round for the lads, Aldrich bellowed, face flushed, but eyes still sharp. Tomorrow we drill like the gods themselves demand it. The door creaked open. In stepped Alara, his woman, tall, dark-haired, with a figure that turned heads even in a modest dress, and a smile that could cut steel. She wove through the crowd, eyes locked on him, ignoring the whistles. Sir Aldrich Stormward, she purred, slipping an arm around his thick waist and pressing close. Still proving you're the strongest oaf in the hollow? The bed's getting cold without you, love. He grinned down at her, wrapping a massive arm around her shoulders. Woman, you wound me. These fools need a proper thrashing before they forget who keeps the wolves at bay. Wolves? She rose on her toes, lips brushing his ear. The only beast I want tonight is the one who promised to ruin me proper after last night's teasing. Or have you gone soft on ale and games? Her hand trailed down his armored chest, playful, but hungry. Come home, Aldrich. I'll make it worth abandoning your adoring drunks. He chuckled, low and warm, but there was heat in it. You drive a harder bargain than any lord, Alara. Fine. Lads, don't drink the place dry without me. He let her pull him toward the door amid good-natured jeers and lewd suggestions. As they stepped into the cooling night, another large carriage rumbled into town, driven by a cloaked figure hunched on the bench. Alara glanced at it, then tugged Aldrich's arm harder. Leave it. That's none of ours tonight. Home. Now. He grumbled but followed, their laughter fading into the shadows. The cloaked figure guided the carriage to an abandoned barn on the edge of town and waited. Hours passed. Drunkards stumbled from the tavern, arms slung around women or men, seeking fleeting warmth. Night guards walked their rounds with the lazy confidence of men who had never truly faced horror. Lantern by lantern, Eldridge Hollow went dark. When the last light died, the figure slid from the carriage. Its robes brushed the dirt, yet no footprints marked its passage. It glided, weightless and silent, melting into the deeper black between buildings. Doors yielded to subtle pressure. Into humble homes it slipped, leaning over small beds where children slept. A pinch of white powder blown gently across their faces ensured they remained limp and dreaming as it gathered them like cordwood. Small bodies draped over its shoulder. It moved on. An alleyway. A mangy dog erupted into frenzied barking. Without breaking stride, the figure flicked a knife. The blade punched through the dog's throat with a wet thunk, pinning it to a wall. It twitched once and stilled. Just around the corner, a guard rounded the bend, lantern raised. Hold! Who goes? The child was dropped unceremoniously into the mud. Steel whispered from its sheath, a massive blade, far too long and heavy for any normal man. The guard rushed in, sword raised. 2 ringing clashes shattered the quiet. The figure's sword met the guard's, then sheared through mail, flesh, and bone in a single diagonal arc. The man's torso opened like overripe fruit. Intestines spilled in steaming loops across his boots as he toppled, trying uselessly to stuff them back inside with one hand, while blood bubbled from his mouth. His eyes were wide with the same terror the boy in the forest had known. More guards came running at the shout, 5 in total, roused from nearby posts, weapons drawn, and faces pale in the moonlight. They were no match. The first died as the cloaked horror closed the distance in a blur, the great blade bisecting him from shoulder to hip. His top half slid off with a wet slap, legs still standing for a grotesque second before collapsing. The second guard managed a thrust. The figure parried lazily and backhanded him with the flat of the sword, crushing his skull against the wall in a spray of brains and teeth. The third and fourth came together, brave fools. One lost both arms at the elbows in a single horizontal cut, screaming as arterial blood painted the alley crimson. The figure silenced him by driving the sword point first through his open mouth and out the back of his neck. The fourth was disemboweled slowly, the blade twisting in his guts before being ripped free in a gush of viscera that smelled of shit and iron. The last guard turned to flee. The sword took his legs at the knees, then his head as he crawled, leaving it staring sightlessly at the night sky, while the body jerked and emptied itself onto the ground. Silence returned, heavier now, broken only by dripping blood. The cloaked figure bent to retrieve the dropped child, slinging the small, powder-dazed body over its shoulder once more. It turned toward the carriage. A new figure blocked the way. Sir Aldrich Stormward stood at the mouth of the alley in full plate, spear leveled, his face a mask of grim resolve. Lantern light from a fallen guard's discarded light gleamed on his armor. Behind him, Alara waited in the shadows, wide-eyed. "Put the child down," Aldrich growled, voice steady despite the carnage around him. "Now!" The cloaked figure tossed the boy aside like a discarded rag doll. The small body hit the mud with a sickening thud. Steel hissed as the massive sword rose again. The clash of steel shattered the fragile silence of Eldritch Hollow, like the first crack of doom. Sir Aldrich Stormward lunged first, spear thrusting with the disciplined power of a man who had drilled this motion 10,000 times. The point drove straight for the cloaked figure's center mass. The abomination sidestepped with unnatural grace, its massive greatsword whipping around in a horizontal arc that forced Aldrich to pivot his shield inward. The blade slammed against reinforced wood with a thunderous boom, splintering the edge and sending vibrations rattling up Aldrich's arm to his teeth. He held his own, not through superior skill, but raw, stubborn vitality and the weight of plate armor. The spear danced, stabbing low at the legs, then high at the throat, keeping the longer weapon at bay. The cloaked figure pressed forward relentlessly, each swing of its great sword a killing stroke that could bisect a horse. Sparks flew as steel met steel. Aldrich's spear haft cracked under a brutal overhead chop, but held long enough for him to counter, driving the point through the flowing cloak. Fabric tore. A small leather pouch hidden beneath the robes was sliced open. White powder spilled in a glittering cloud, drifting across the blood-slick alley like cursed snow. The figure hissed, a wet, inhuman sound, and instinctively reached to salvage what remained. Aldrich seized the opening. With a roar that shook the shutters of nearby homes, he reversed his spear and slashed the iron-shod butt across the creature's chest. The strike bit deep, carving through hidden armor, plating beneath the cloak. A shower of bright orange sparks erupted into the night as metal screamed against metal. Black ichor, thick and foul-smelling, welled from the gash. The townsfolk were stirring now. Doors creaked open. Lanterns flickered back to life. Faces pale with sleep and fear peered into the street. "What in the gods' names?" a woman whispered. Children were hushed. More soldiers and armed farmers spilled out, gripping pitchforks, axes, and old swords, drawn by the earlier screams, and now the unmistakable song of battle. The fight grew savage. The cloaked horror recovered instantly, abandoning the powder. Its great sword became a storm of death. It feinted high and cut low, shearing through Aldrich's greave and opening a deep gash along his calf. Blood poured hot down his boot. Aldrich grunted, pain fueling his rage, and thrust again, catching the creature's sword arm and drawing more of that unnatural black fluid. They traded blows in the narrow alley, the great sword cleaving chunks from Aldrich's shield until it hung in tatters. A backhand from the flat of the blade sent Aldrich staggering, ribs creaking inside his armor. Yet he refused to fall. He drove the spear into the creature's floating form, piercing cloak and flesh once more. The abomination retaliated by slamming its pommel into Aldrich's helmet, denting the steel and splitting his brow. Blood streamed into his eyes, turning the world red. With a final desperate surge, Aldrich lunged inside the greatsword's reach, dropped his ruined shield, and seized the edge of the cloak with both hands. He heaved with all his considerable strength. The fabric ripped away. Gasps and screams tore through the gathering crowd. Women fainted, men retched, children wailed in pure, animal terror. The thing beneath was no man. 8 thick, sinuous tentacles, each lined with suckers and barbed ridges, floated above the mud, holding its torso aloft in grotesque defiance of gravity. The upper body was roughly humanoid, corded with muscle under slick, mottled gray-green skin. But the head was a nightmare. A bulbous, octopus-like cranium with writhing tendrils, framing a face that was almost human, save for the lipless beak mouth and cold, unblinking golden eyes that held nothing but ancient, cosmic hunger. Armor plates of some alien chitin fused to its torso, cracked where Aldrich had struck. Panic exploded. Townsfolk fled screaming. Demon! Abomination from the pit! Some dropped their weapons and ran. Others stood frozen, vomiting at the sight. Aldrich's face twisted in revulsion, but his jaw set like iron. Whatever you are, you die here. The fight renewed with even greater ferocity. The creature, now unmasked, moved with horrifying speed. Its tentacles lashed like living whips. In one grand, contemptuous motion, it batted Aldrich's spear aside with the flat of its great sword, then coiled 2 tentacles around the haft and yanked. The spear tore from Aldrich's grip, spinning away into the darkness. Before he could draw his side sword, a powerful tentacle slammed into his chest plate like a battering ram. The impact lifted him off his feet and hurled him backward. He crashed into a stone wall with bone-jarring force, mortar cracking around him. Pain flared white-hot through his spine. The creature was already there. It seized the fallen spear in a tentacle and drove it forward with monstrous strength. The point punched through Aldrich's side just below the ribs, deep, grinding through mail, flesh, and organs before embedding into the stone wall behind him. It pinned him there like a butchered hog. Blood bubbled from his mouth. He gasped, eyes wide with agony, but still alive. Not a killing blow. Not yet. The abomination loomed over him, great sword rising. The tip hovered inches from Aldrich's exposed throat. His eyes widened, breath ragged, knowing the end had come. Thunder roared overhead. The first fat drops of rain began to fall, hissing as they struck hot blood and steel. The metallic scent of ozone mixed with the copper reek of slaughter. Then the creature froze, its golden eyes narrowed, head tilting as if tasting the wind. Something else had entered the town. Something that did not belong on this soft, backwater world. Something strong. It turned slowly. From the mouth of the alley, emerging from the tree-lined darkness, like a predator stepping out of legend, came Kriakk. Rain plastered his scarred, tattooed body. His makeshift axe and brutal wooden club hung loose in his massive hands. His gaze locked onto the tentacled horror with pure, predatory recognition. No words passed between them. Only the old understanding of killers. One of them would feed the earth tonight. The creature pulled its sword back from Aldrich's throat, floating backward with eerie grace, curious now. A low, wet snarl escaped its beak as rain splashed across its monstrous face. Kriakk bared his teeth, hefting his weapons. The hunter had found its worthy prey. The rain came down in a biblical deluge, turning the blood-soaked streets of Eldridge Hollow into a churning mire of mud and gore. Lightning split the sky as Kriakk and the tentacled abomination circled each other like two apex predators denied worthy prey for too long. The creature struck first. Its great sword swept in a whistling arc that could have felled a tree. Kriakk met it with his makeshift axe, the crude blade screaming in protest as sparks exploded and the impact jarred his shoulders. He answered with the club, studded with flint and nails, swinging in a brutal overhead smash that caught two tentacles mid-lash. Barbed suckers ripped free in wet pops, spraying black ichor that sizzled in the rain. They exploded into motion. Kriakk fought like the barbarian he was. No elegance, only raw, hateful violence. He hacked with the axe at the creature's humanoid torso, carving deep grooves into its chitin armor. The club followed in relentless arcs, shattering tentacles that tried to coil around his legs. One tentacle wrapped his waist, suckers tearing skin and muscle. Kriakk roared and brought the club down on it like a hammer on an anvil. The appendage burst in a spray of pulp and viscous fluid. The beast retaliated with contemptuous fury. Its great sword moved faster than anything that size should, cleaving through the air with lethal precision. It caught Kriakk's axe on the downswing. The impact was cataclysmic. The scavenged alloy head shattered into glittering fragments, the wooden haft exploding into splinters that stabbed into Kriakk's hands. He discarded the ruined weapon with a snarl and doubled down on the club, becoming a whirlwind of primal rage. He beat the hell out of the creature. The club rose and fell like the judgment of an angry god. It smashed into the beast's shoulder with a wet crunch, cracking chitin and pulping flesh beneath. Tentacles lashed wildly, one raking 4 deep furrows across Kriakk's chest, peeling skin back to the muscle. He ignored it, hammering the club into the monster's bulbous head. The octopus-like face split open along the beak, golden eyes bulging in shock as black blood poured down its mottled skin. Another strike crushed 3 more tentacles against the ground, grinding them into the mud until they twitched, like dying worms. The townsfolk who hadn't fled watched in horrified awe from doorways and windows, rain plastering their faces. The creature screamed, a high, bubbling screech of pure alien hatred, and brought its great sword around in a devastating horizontal cut. The blade sheared clean through Kriakk's club mid-swing, cutting the reinforced wood and embedded stone in two, as if it were paper. The top half spun away into the darkness. Now weaponless, Kriakk became pure survival. He dodged and weaved with the brutal grace of a lifetime spent in slaughter. The great sword missed his neck by a hair, carving a chunk from his shoulder instead. Blood mixed with rain streaming down his tattooed torso. He grabbed a lashing tentacle, yanked the beast off balance, and drove his fist into its face, feeling the beak crack under his knuckles. The sword came again. He twisted, letting it graze his ribs in a line of fire, then slammed an elbow into the wound he had earlier opened on its chest. Black ichor fountained over them both. Aldrich groaned against the wall, still pinned, watching through bloodied vision. Kriakk saw his chance. He lunged past a tentacle whip, grabbed the spear shaft still impaling the knight, and ripped it free in one savage pull. Aldrich cried out as fresh blood gushed from his side, but the big man stayed conscious, eyes locked on the duel. Now armed with the spear, Kriakk became death incarnate. He thrust with all his barbaric strength. The point punched through the creature's lower torso, just above where the tentacles joined. The beast howled, and tried to pull away, but Kriakk drove forward, twisting the spear viciously. Organs, wet, alien things, tore inside. Tentacles flailed, ripping at Kriakk's back and legs, opening new wounds that poured crimson into the mud. Rain hammered down, washing blood from both warriors as they screamed at one another. The creature's golden eyes burned with contempt. Kriakk's burned with triumph. With a guttural bellow that echoed over the thunder, Kriakk heaved upward. The spear lifted the entire abomination off the ground. Its tentacles kicked and thrashed uselessly in the air as it impaled itself deeper. Black blood poured in sheets down the spear haft, over Kriakk's hands and arms. They screamed together, beast in furious denial, Kriakk in savage victory, as lightning illuminated their locked forms. The creature weakened. Its great sword slipped from weakening tentacles and clattered into the mud. More black ichor bubbled from its beak. Its golden eyes dimmed. Kriakk roared one final time and slammed the spear's butt into the ground, leaving the beast suspended and twitching. It bled out in the rain, body convulsing as its unnatural life finally ebbed. With a contemptuous grunt, Kriakk ripped the spear free and tossed the corpse aside like offal. It landed in the mud with a heavy splash. He stalked over, planted one massive bare foot on its cracked chest, and stomped. Ribs and chitin shattered inward with a sickening crunch. Then he dropped, grabbed the sides of its bulbous head with both bloody hands, and pulled. Tendons and alien flesh tore with wet, ripping sounds. The head came free in a gush of gore, spinal-like tendrils snapping like rotten ropes. Kriakk held the monstrous trophy aloft for a moment, rain washing over its dead eyes, before hurling it into the darkness. Silence fell, broken only by the pouring rain. Aldrich, still slumped against the wall and bleeding heavily, met Kriakk's gaze. The barbarian stood there, wounded, exhausted, covered in his own blood and the creature's filth, yet unbroken. The two warriors looked at one another across the carnage, no words, only a silent nod of understanding. Two men who had walked the edge of death that night. Two killers who recognized the rare breed of the other. Kriakk turned toward the forest, weapons lost, body screaming, but his hunger momentarily sated. The worthy foe had been found and broken. The monster within. Part 2. The world swam back into focus through a haze of blood and rain. Kriakk's eyes opened to a sky that was not the bruised twilight of that forsaken backwater planet, but a vast, endless blue pierced by a merciless golden sun. The air hit him like a memory made flesh, dry, hot, carrying the scent of baked earth, wild grass, and distant dung fires. He lay on hard-packed savanna soil, the kind that had once cradled his first steps. A sharp, burning pain lanced through his side. He grunted, pressing a massive hand to the wound. Fresh blood welled between his fingers from a deep gash left by some beast's claw. It matched the agony from the tentacled horror's strike, yet here it felt right, familiar, a warrior's badge. Beside him lay the carcass of a massive saber-toothed cat, its striped hide torn and bloodied. One of its enormous fangs had been ripped from its jaw and driven straight through the side of its own skull in the death throes of their struggle. Kriakk stared at it, then smiled, a rare, savage curl of his lips. This felt correct. The hot sun baking his scarred skin, the cool breeze whispering across the endless flat plains, the distant jagged silhouette of cold, cavernous mountains rising like the bones of the world itself. He had been born here, on Earth, Al-Kabulan, in the time before names, before languages carved weak divisions between men and beasts, before the stars had called him away to endless war. He rose slowly, muscles protesting, blood dripping down his flank. The plains stretched out in raw, untamed majesty, golden grasses swaying like a living sea under the sun's glare, acacia trees standing sentinel with their flat crowns, herds of distant beasts moving like shadows across the horizon. Dust devils danced in the distance. The mountains loomed closer as he walked, towering ancient stone teeth cloaked in mist and shadow, their caves promising shelter and secrets. Beauty here was not soft. It was brutal, honest. Life and death intertwined in every blade of grass that could cut skin, every predator that could end you in a heartbeat. Kriakk moved through it in awe, bare feet sinking into warm earth, the wind carrying the distant roar of waterfalls and the cries of unseen hunters. For the first time in countless cycles, the constant hunger in his chest eased. He walked until the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in blood reds and deep indigos. The caves appeared as he remembered, dark mouths in the mountainside, smoke curling from within, the faint glow of fires flickering like watchful eyes. Figures emerged, cavemen and women, his people, lounging at the entrances in furs and scars. They spotted him and froze. Slowly, cautiously, they approached. No words passed between them. Language had not yet been born when Kriakk drew his first breath. They communicated in grunts, gestures, and the language of strength. Hands reached out, hesitant at first, then bolder. Rough fingers traced the thick cords of muscle on his arms, the heavy scars that mapped a lifetime of violence, the coarse hair on his chest. Women touched his face, trying to reconcile the hulking warrior with the child they once knew. Men pounded fists against his shoulders, feeling the power there. Their eyes held recognition mixed with wonder. Then a voice, raw, guttural, split the air. "Scooty Scoo." The tribe lowered their heads in respect, parting like grass before wind. From the largest cave emerged a big, tough-looking caveman, broad as a boulder, heavy brow ridged with old fractures, body wrapped in the hides of beasts he had slain with his own hands. A heavy wooden club, stained dark with generations of blood, rested in his grip. Kriakk's father. Kriakk lowered his head in respect. The older man stepped forward, calloused fingers lifting his son's chin. Their eyes met. Same fire, same unyielding will. The father nodded once, then pulled Kriakk into a crushing embrace. Chest slammed against chest. Grunt sounds echoed through the gathering, deep, primal affirmations of life and return. Fists beat against chests in a rhythmic thunder, the sound rolling across the plains like war drums. Kriakk was home. The tribe's joy was fierce and unfiltered. They dragged him toward the central fire where massive beasts roasted on spits, creatures whose names had been forgotten by the galaxy, but lived eternal in these bones. Kriakk tore into the hot, dripping meat with his teeth, grease running down his chin, the rich, gamey taste flooding his senses, with memories long buried. Blood and fat sustained the body the way battle sustained the soul. As night fully claimed the mountains, drums began. Hollow logs and stretched hides pounded by calloused hands. The people danced. Raw, primal movements. Bodies slamming together, feet stomping the earth, hands raised to the starlit sky. Women whirled, men leaped, Children chased sparks from the fire. Kriakk joined them, his wounds forgotten in the rhythm, the pain in his side a distant echo. For this night, the galaxy's endless wars, the weak empires, the tentacled abomination, all of it faded. He was among his own, blood of his blood. The fire roared higher as the feast continued, the drums beating like the heartbeat of Alkabulin itself. Kriakk danced and ate and bled under the ancient sky, a sun returned to the cradle of savagery. For now, it was enough. The drums gradually slowed to a heavy rhythmic pulse that matched the heartbeat of the mountain itself. The feast had left the air thick with the scent of charred meat, sweat, and wood smoke. Kriakk sat near the central fire, grease and blood still slick on his hands and beard, when two young hunters dragged a fresh kill into the main cave chamber, a massive horned beast with a throat freshly torn open. Its warm blood still steamed in the cool night air. The tribe gathered closer, eyes turned to the far wall of the cave, a vast, smooth expanse of pale stone that had been left deliberately blank for generations. It was the story wall, the only history these people possessed. Layers upon layers of ancient paintings already covered the surrounding rock. Hunts, births, battles against beasts and rival tribes, all rendered in blood, charcoal, and ochre. The blank section waited like an open wound, hungry for new truth. Several elders and warriors pointed silently toward it, their expressions solemn and expectant. Your story, their gestures said. The time you were gone. Paint what you have become. Kriakk rose slowly. A sharp ache bloomed behind his eyes, a pressure that felt like something foreign trying to claw its way out of his skull. The gash in his side throbbed in time with his pulse, hot and angry, fresh blood seeping through the crude herbal poultice one of the women had pressed against it. For a moment he hesitated, staring at the blank stone. Painting it would make the memories real again. The galaxy, the weakness, the endless slaughter. Part of him wanted to stay here, in the simplicity of blood and fire and tribe. But a warrior did not hide from his own life. He stepped forward. Reaching down, he plunged his massive hand into the still bleeding throat of the fresh kill. Blood welled hot and thick around his fingers. He withdrew a dripping fistful dark crimson running down his forearm in rivulets. The tribe watched in silence as he approached the wall. Kriakk pressed his bloodied palm to the stone and began. The first strokes were crude, powerful. He painted the moment he had been taken. Stars falling from the sky like burning spears, strange lights swallowing him while his father roared in defiance. Then came the wars, jagged lines depicting starships and crumbling spires of empires. He smeared broad, violent arcs for the battles, worlds burning, gene-forged champions split open, oceans of gore. With his fingers, he clawed the shapes of towering machines that eventually failed, leaving soft kings and presidents dying in their palaces of glass and lies. Black smears for the fallen empires, red handprints for the worthy foes he had killed. His movements grew more intense. The headache pounded like a war drum inside his skull. The wound in his side wept freely now, dripping down his hip. But he did not stop. He painted the backwater planet, the choking forest, the six-legged saber-tooth he had slain with tooth and axe, the murdered child in the woods, the tentacled abomination in the rain. Each image was savage and raw, the great sword clashing against his club, tentacles bursting under his blows, the final impalement, and the ripping of the beast's head from its body. Blood ran low on his hand. He returned to the carcass without pause, plunging deeper, coating his arm to the elbow in fresh gore. The tribe remained silent, watching the story unfold in grim reverence. No one moved to help. This was his truth alone to tell. As the final strokes took shape, the nod of respect between him and the armored knight, the return through the forest, the opening of his eyes on the savannah, Kriakk stepped back. His chest heaved. Sweat and blood streaked his body. The headache receded slightly, leaving only a dull, echoing ache. The wound still burned, but it felt cleaner now, as if the telling had cauterized something deeper. The cave wall told a brutal epic, a sun taken by the stars, forged in the fires of weak civilizations, an endless war, returning not softened, but hardened into something even more primal and unstoppable. His father stepped forward first. The old chieftain placed a heavy hand on Kriakk's shoulder, studying the new paintings with eyes that held both pride and the weight of knowing what his son had endured. Grunts of approval rippled through the tribe. Fists beat against chests once more. Kriakk stared at his work, the blood already beginning to darken and dry on the stone. For the first time since his return, a deep, weary peace settled over him. The story was told. The blood had spoken. He was home, and the mountain now carried the weight of his long exile. The days blurred into the eternal rhythm of the tribe. Kriakk lived as one of them once more, raw, unthinking, primal. He rose with the sun, hunted in the tall grasses with stone-tipped spears and bare hands. He dragged kills back to the caves, blood caking his forearms. He mated when the urge took him, slept on hard rock wrapped in furs, and let the simplicity of survival wash away the galaxy's lies. The wound in his side healed into another jagged scar, a reminder that even here, pain was honest. He spent long hours with his father. The old chieftain, still thick with muscle and heavy with years of dominance, would take him into the plains at dawn. They hunted together, stalking a massive woolly beast through the dust, coordinating with grunts and gestures. When the kill came, they roared together, fists pounding chests in victory. In the evenings, they wrestled outside the caves, their bodies slammed together like colliding boulders, grunting and straining, sweat and dirt flying. Kriakk was stronger now, forged in 1,000 alien wars, but he held back. He allowed his father to pin him, to win with a final triumphant roar. The tribe cheered, still seeing their chieftain as the unbreakable heart of the people. Kriakk did not mind. Respect for the old bull kept the tribe strong. He trained the new hunters as well, young men barely blooded. He showed them how to crack open a skull with a club, how to read the wind for an ambush, how to tear a throat with teeth when weapons failed. They learned quickly, all except one. That one stood out. A leaner youth with sharp eyes that held something wrong. A glint too educated, too knowing for a people without language. Every time Kriakk looked at him, a spike of pain drove through his skull. The headache returned, worse each time, like something inside his brain was trying to tear its way free. Kriakk ignored the youth, turning his back and focusing on the others. The ache always faded when he looked away. Then one evening, as the tribe gathered around the fire, a voice cut through the air. Kriakk. It was distant, deep, unmistakably manly, laced with urgency. It echoed from somewhere beyond the caves. beyond the mountains themselves. Kriakk froze. The tribe continued their grunting conversations, oblivious. The voice called again, louder, more desperate. The world began to fracture. The headache returned with crushing force, a white-hot blade behind his eyes. His wound throbbed violently, as if freshly torn. The cave walls seemed to breathe. The ground tilted. This feeling, helplessness, disorientation, was utterly foreign. He hated it. A warrior did not kneel to ghosts. His knees buckled anyway. The tribe turned, confused grunts rising, but Kriakk collapsed forward, the stone floor rushing up to meet him. He woke gasping, lungs burning as if pulled from deep water. Bright, merciless light stabbed down from above. He was strapped to a cold metal table, naked, his body splayed open. Mechanical arms, thin, precise, gleaming with surgical tools, moved with cold efficiency from beyond his vision. Blades and probes cut into his flesh, peeling back layers of muscle, drilling into bone. Pain was a constant, white fire. Blood trickled down his sides onto the table. In the shadows at the far end of the chamber stood a tall, skeletal alien made of sharpened bone and shadow. Ubani, his master. "Ubani!" Kriakk roared, voice raw. Dread and fear flooded him, emotions the creature had surgically suppressed when it first claimed him from the savannah all those cycles ago. They crashed over him now like a tidal wave. "Release me." He thrashed against the restraints, muscles bulging, veins standing out like ropes. The mechanical arms continued their work without pause, slicing deeper. Pain overwhelmed him. His roars turned to guttural screams. Eventually, even his unbreakable will crumbled. He succumbed, body going limp, as darkness swallowed him again. When awareness returned, he was alone, naked, floating in absolute darkness. No cave, no plains, no stars, only void. Then came the heavy thudding footsteps. A massive shape materialized from the black. A Tyrannosaurus Rex, colossal and ancient, its scales scarred and eyes gleaming with unnatural intelligence. It stopped before Kriakk, lowered its enormous head, and looked him up and down with clear disdain. The dinosaur scoffed, a deep, rumbling sound. When it spoke, its voice carried a strange, cultured accent. "I have no idea why you are so special, ape man. Truly baffling." Kriakk stared, stunned into silence for the first time in memory. A talking dinosaur. The absurdity clashed violently with everything he was. "Where am I, beast?" he growled, fists clenched. The T-Rex threw its head back and laughed, a booming, mocking sound that echoed through the void. "You are aboard a vessel, my primitive friend, one captained by an insufferable race of aliens who call themselves the SI. Welcome to the real nightmare." The void trembled as Kriakk shook his head, blood-matted hair whipping across his face. "I was taken from these plains," he growled. "From this world. How? When exactly?" The Tyrannosaurus Rex gave a low, rumbling chuckle. "I do not know, ape. The machine does not share every secret with its prisoners." "Are we in the same room?" The beast shook its massive head. "We are in a simulation, a shared dream woven by the machine. If you are smart, if you know how to twist the code, you can skip between the different consciousnesses. They are all hooked to the same nightmare. Kriakk's fists clenched. How do I get out? The dinosaur laughed again, a deep mocking sound that echoed into infinity. Simple, barbarian. You wake up. Kriakk's eyes snapped open. He was back in the cave. An old woman hunched over him, her toothless mouth spitting a foul paste of herbs and saliva directly onto his tongue. The taste was bitter earth and rot. He sat up with a snarl and shoved her away hard enough to send her sprawling. He spat the mixture out in thick strings, chest heaving. The headache returned like a spear through his skull. The world pulsed. Then his father entered the cave, face etched with worry. The old chieftain grunted softly and gestured for Kriakk to follow. They walked deeper into the mountain until the passage opened into a paradise valley. Vibrant greens and impossible flowers carpeted the ground. Crystal streams glittered. Animals, fat, healthy, unafraid, moved through the lush grass. The air smelled sweet, clean, too clean. Kriakk knew it was wrong, but the animal part of him desperately wanted it to be real. His father turned to him. I know of Ubani, he said, voice heavy. It is urgent. Give me the planetary address of the world where you were taken. Kriakk narrowed his eyes. This is the world where I was taken. His father's face twisted in displeasure. You are tainted. Before Kriakk could respond, the back of his father's hand cracked across his face like a club. The blow sent him staggering. Blood filled his mouth. Kriakk snarled, rage boiling, but his father stood firm, unyielding. You have lived among aliens on distant worlds, slept with their filthy whores wherever your feet landed. How am I to know if you are even still my son? Tell me the address. Footsteps echoed from behind his father. A figure emerged from the paradise haze. Basin. Tall, sharp-featured, with cold, calculating eyes, and a gray, form-fitting suit that clung to his lean frame like liquid shadow. The sight of his mortal enemy flooded Kriakk with pure, volcanic rage. He lunged forward with a roar. His father's hand shot out, seizing him by the throat. Muscles like iron cables lifted Kriakk clean off the ground. He dangled, choking, feet kicking uselessly. Basin stepped closer, shaking his head slowly. His voice was deep, low, and stoic. All your wishes can come true, Kriakk. Simply give us the planetary location where Ubani took you. Kriakk thrashed against his father's grip, snarling and spitting. His father's eyes hardened. He wants to fight you, Basin. First, he must earn that privilege. With a powerful heave, his father hurled him over a stone balcony. Kriakk tumbled down the rocky mountainside, jagged stones tearing gashes across his back, shoulders, and legs. He crashed at the bottom in a broken heap, bloodied and bruised. Slowly, painfully, he rose. He composed himself, chest heaving, eyes burning with fury. Above, Basin and his father stared down at him. A winding staircase carved into the rock led back up to them. Kriakk took one step forward. That was when the rush began. Enemies from his past poured from the cave mouth like a tide of death. The first was a hulking gene-forged brute from the Varicor siege. Muscle grafted onto muscle, eyes glowing with implanted rage. Kriakk met him head-on, smashing his fist into the brute's jaw so hard the bone shattered. He grabbed the broken jaw, tore it free from the face in a spray of blood and teeth, then drove his fingers into the exposed throat and ripped the windpipe out. Next came a serpentine assassin from the outer rings, all bladed limbs and venomous speed. She struck fast. Kriakk caught her arm, wrenched it from the socket with a wet pop, and used the detached limb to beat her skull into pulp against the stone steps. Her screams turned to gurgles as he stomped her ribcage until bone shards pierced her heart. A cybernetic warlord followed, half machine, half rotting flesh. Kriakk tore the metal plating from its chest with bare hands, exposing wires and organs. He ripped the still-beating mechanical heart free and crushed it in his fist, while headbutting the warlord's face, until the visor shattered and brains leaked out. Then came the worst, a towering, multi-limbed horror from the deep void, something Ubani had once sicked on him. Its claws raked deep furrows across Kriakk's torso. He went fully berserk. No technique, only savagery. He tore one arm completely from its body, using the severed limb as a club to smash the others. He bit into its throat, ripping out chunks of flesh and tendon. Blood sprayed in hot sheets as he gouged out its eyes with his thumbs, then snapped its neck backward until the spine shattered. He kept tearing even after it was dead, pulling intestines out in long, steaming ropes, and smashing the skull until it was nothing but red paste on the rocks. Kriakk climbed the stairs, a bloody ruin. Gashes covered his body. His fists were raw meat. Blood, his and theirs, coated him like war paint. He reached the top and slammed his shoulder into a pair of massive stone doors. They groaned open. A vast throne room lay beyond. Basin sat atop a high throne of black bone, looking down with cold indifference. At the base of the steps, Kriakk's father waited in full cybernetic armor. Plates of dark metal fused to his flesh, spear leveled and humming with lethal energy. The old chieftain roared and charged. The throne room reeked of old blood and ozone. Kriakk's cybernetically enhanced father charged like a war machine given flesh. The spear thrust forward with blinding speed. Kriakk barely twisted aside, the blade slicing a deep furrow across his ribs. Before he could counter, the butt of the spear cracked against his jaw with mechanical force. Teeth shattered, blood sprayed. The old chieftain was no longer the man who had wrestled him in the plains. Armor plating hummed with power. Servos whined. Each blow landed like a falling boulder. A backhand sent Kriakk staggering. A kick to the knee dropped him, the joint buckling with a sickening crack. His father grabbed him by the hair, yanking his head up, and drove a cybernetic fist into his face. Once, twice, 3 times. Kriakk's nose exploded. One eye swelled shut. Blood poured down his throat, choking him. Basin watched from the throne, laughing softly at first, then louder. A cold, mocking sound that echoed through the chamber. "Look at the mighty barbarian," Basin called, reduced to a whimpering child by his own sire. How pathetic. All that rage, all that conquest across the stars, and you still kneel to daddy. Kriakk roared and lunged, landing a heavy blow against his father's armored chest. The plating dented, but the counter was merciless. The spear haft slammed into his stomach, doubling him over. Then the blade reversed and carved across his back, peeling skin and muscle in a long, ragged strip. Kriakk dropped to one knee, gasping. His father pressed the advantage without mercy. He stomped on Kriakk's hand, grinding the bones into the stone floor with a wet crunch. He drove an elbow into the back of Kriakk's neck, slamming his face into the ground hard enough to split the skin across his brow. Blood pooled beneath him. Every breath was agony. "Weak," his father snarled, voice distorted through the armor's vox. "Tainted by alien whores and soft stars. You are no son of mine." Basin's laughter grew. "Break him. Show him what real strength looks like." He thought he was the apex predator. How delightful to watch the illusion die. Kriakk fought back with everything he had left. He tackled his father's legs, trying to bring the bigger man down. They crashed together in a frenzy of violence. Kriakk bit into the exposed tubing at his father's neck, tearing out wires and black fluid. He smashed his forehead into the helmet repeatedly, until his own skull cracked and blood streamed into his remaining good eye. It wasn't enough. His father seized him by the throat again, lifted him high, and slammed him down onto the steps. Ribs snapped like dry branches. Then the spear rose. The blade punched through Kriakk's chest with a wet, meaty thunk just below the sternum. It drove deep, scraping against bone before pinning him to the floor. Kriakk gasped, blood bubbling from his mouth. His body convulsed around the spear. He looked up into his father's eyes. There it was, the same fire, the same primal, unbreakable will he remembered from the caves of Alkebulan, the same savage love and brutal protection. For a moment, the illusion felt real. Kriakk smiled through the blood and ruin. A genuine, tired smile. He stopped fighting. His body relaxed around the spear. The pain became distant, almost peaceful. He let death come for him, heart slowing, vision tunneling to black. Just as the final beat stuttered in his chest, Kriakk's eyes snapped open. He was in a cold, sterile chamber. Harsh, white lights. Restraints pinning him to a medical slab. A reptilian alien, green scales, yellow eyes, clawed hands, leaned over him, holding a cluster of long, wicked needles that it had been driving into his nerves and muscles. Kriakk roared. He surged against the restraints, muscles tearing with the effort. Metal groaned and snapped. One arm came free, then the next. He grabbed the lizard man's head with both hands, fingers digging into scaled flesh. The alien shrieked, dropping the needles. "Stop. Please. Stop. I'm just the technician. I'm not..." Kriakk did not stop. He squeezed. The lizard's eyes bulged. Scales cracked. Bone creaked. The alien's claws scrabbled uselessly at Kriakk's wrists, drawing shallow lines of blood. Its screams turned to wet gurgles as its skull deformed under the pressure. With a final savage grunt, Kriakk crushed the lizard's head. Brains and bone fragments exploded between his fingers in a hot, sticky mess. The body dropped to the floor with a limp thud, twitching once before going still. Kriakk lay there, gasping, covered in fresh blood, staring at the ceiling of the alien ship as alarms began to wail in the distance. The alarm screamed through the sterile corridors as the heavy doors burst open. Sir Aldrich Stormward charged into the chamber in gleaming gold-plated armor, sword already drawn, followed by a handful of similarly armored knights. Their plates were scorched and dented, but they moved with grim purpose. Kriakk slowly rose from the slab, blue reptilian blood dripping from his hands and face. He wiped it off with a forearm, then spat a thick glob onto the crushed remains of the lizard technician. Aldrich approached, breathing hard, and extended a heavy, well-forged sword hilt first. It wasn't easy cutting our way to you, barbarian. I'm sorry I didn't arrive sooner. Kriakk stared at the blade, then at Aldrich. Another illusion, another layer of this endless torment. His hand closed around the hilt anyway. The weight felt real enough. He gave a single, wary nod. We need to move, Aldrich said urgently. More men of iron are converging on this sector. Kriakk glanced at the other knights. Dark oil streaked their armor in places where blades had struck true. He grunted. Not men. Machines. They fled the chamber, Aldrich and his men leading the way through twisting underground laboratory corridors lit by harsh, flickering lights. The air reeked of chemicals and ozone. Distant mechanical footsteps echoed behind them, rhythmic, heavy, relentless. A deafening roar suddenly shook the hallway ahead. The knights faltered, faces pale beneath their helmets. One muttered a prayer. They looked ready to break and run. Kriakk pushed past them. I know that roar. He strode down the side passage alone. In a reinforced containment cell, the Tyrannosaurus Rex was chained and wired into a massive harness, its massive frame straining against restraints. The beast's eyes locked onto him. Free me, ape man, the T-Rex rumbled. Do this, and I will send you wherever you wish to go. Kriakk narrowed his eyes. How? I know this laboratory. There is a device that can teleport across vast distances, but I must be free to operate it. Kriakk didn't hesitate long. He smashed the control panel with the pommel of his new sword, then hacked through the reinforced chains and cables. Sparks flew. The T-Rex stepped free with a satisfied growl. They returned to the group. The knights recoiled in terror at the sight of the colossal predator. The T-Rex looked them over with clear disdain. Pathetic little tin soldiers. Follow me if you want to live. He led them through the complex at a thunderous pace, eventually reaching a vast circular chamber. In its center stood a colossal teleporter, a massive ring of ancient glowing metal inscribed with shifting runes and symbols, large enough for the dinosaur to pass through. The T-Rex approached the control console, massive claws dancing over the alien interface with surprising dexterity. The ring hummed to life. Energy swirled within the portal, stabilizing into a clear view of a war-torn city at night. Stone buildings, searchlights cutting through the sky, the distant thunder of anti-aircraft fire. London, 1940s. The T-Rex glanced back at Kriakk, a toothy grin splitting its jaws. I trust you know how to operate this device once I'm through? Kriakk studied the controls for a moment, then nodded. Lizard soldiers in armored suits suddenly poured into the chamber from multiple entrances, weapons raised and hissing in their alien tongue. The T-Rex bellowed and charged straight toward the active portal. Laser fire scorched its hide, but the beast didn't slow. It leapt through the swirling gateway. The portal snapped shut behind it with a thunderous crack, leaving only fading sparks. Kriakk gripped his sword tighter as the lizard troops opened fire. Aldrich and his knights formed up beside him, steel ready. The chamber erupted into carnage. Lizard soldiers in armored suits poured through the entrances, firing energy weapons that scorched the air. Aldrich and his knights charged with a roar, steel meeting alien scale and metal. Kriakk waded into the fray like a demon unleashed. He took the head off the first lizard with a savage upward cut, the blade shearing through neck and spine in a spray of blue blood. Another soldier fired at point-blank range. Kriakk grabbed the barrel, wrenched it aside, and drove his sword through the creature's chest, twisting until guts spilled out in wet ropes. He ripped the blade free and used it to parry a bayonet, then headbutted the attacker hard enough to cave in its snout before stomping its skull flat against the floor. The fight was brutal and one-sided in its savagery. One knight was cut in half at the waist by concentrated fire, screaming as his torso fell and his legs kept standing for a grotesque second. Another lost an arm to a plasma blade, only to be finished when a lizard tore out his throat with clawed hands. Kriakk avenged them both, hacking limbs from bodies, opening lizard torsos from groin to sternum, and crushing one soldier's head between his hands until the helmet imploded and brains squirted between his fingers. When the last lizard fell, its chest caved in by Kriakk's boot. The chamber was a slaughterhouse. Only 4 remained standing: Kriakk, Aldrich, and 2 surviving knights, all of them bloodied and breathing hard. Kriakk looked at Aldrich, really looked at him for the first time. In the big knight's steady gaze, he saw something rare, an ally. "Why did you come for me?" Kriakk asked, voice rough. Aldrich wiped blood from his blade. "We are comrades. That's reason enough." Kriakk scoffed, a harsh, bitter sound. "I'm not used to such luxuries." He turned toward the control panel, sword still dripping. One of the remaining knights removed their helmet, revealing a woman with short-cropped dark hair and a scarred face. She stared at the now inactive portal. "Why didn't the dragon stay and fight with us?" Kriakk ignored her. Aldrich gave a tired chuckle, trying to cut the tension. "Perhaps he didn't like the company of us tin soldiers. Can't blame the beast. Half of us smell worse than the lizards." Kriakk paused at the console, his brow furrowed. "I do not recall how I came to be here. The last thing I remember is the battle in the town, spearing that tentacled filth that was taking children." Aldrich shook his head in disbelief. "That was well over a year ago, my friend." Kriakk stepped back from the panel, eyes narrowing. "Explain." Aldrich spoke quickly, but steadily. "After the battle, you stayed with us in Eldridge Hollow. It was rough at first. Your ways and ours didn't always mix. But you found something there. You helped strengthen our small army, trained the men alongside me, drank with us in the tavern at night, told stories around campfires during hunts. Then one strange night, a man in odd clothing came asking for you by name. You had been entertaining company. When we brought you the news, you left without a word. Months passed. Then we heard rumors of a strange structure appearing in the mountains north of the hollow. I rallied every man I could and came for you." Kriakk stared at him, suspicion still burning. He raised the sword, pointing the tip at Aldrich's throat. "What did I tell you of my past?" "Not much," Aldrich replied evenly. "Only that you seek the most powerful." Kriak's grip tightened. "Who was the man who came for me? If we are friends, surely I must have said." Aldrich searched his memory. "Basil, Basin, something like that. He said he killed your master." Kriakk slowly lowered the sword. The truth was in Aldrich's eyes. He nodded. Heavy, deliberate footsteps echoed from a side entrance. A tall figure entered the chamber, 8 feet of living nightmare. Its body was thin and skeletal, composed entirely of pale, hardened bone-like material. A long, sinuous neck supported an inverted triangular head with enormous pitch-black eyes and a narrow slit for a mouth. It moved with eerie, floating grace. "Greeting, cave dweller," the being spoke directly into their minds, its telepathic voice cold and resonant. "I am Zarok. You have something I require. Where is your planet?" Kriakk shook his head in disbelief, teeth gritted. This was not Ubani. Aldrich narrowed his eyes, gripping his sword tighter. "What does it mean?" he asked Kriakk. "What is it talking about?" The tall, bone-like alien stood motionless, its triangular head tilting slightly as it regarded them with those vast, unblinking black eyes. "I am Zarok of the SI, the Superior Intellect," the voice resonated telepathically, smooth, refined, and dripping with ancient arrogance. "We seek Ubani, because he is kin, blood of our blood, though wayward and secretive. I have hunted for him since before the Great War, between the Sovereign Dominion and the Metalon races tore entire sectors asunder. Millennia of silence, and yet the trail grows warm once more." Zarok took a graceful step forward, long neck curving. "I see the hesitation in your primitive mind, cave dweller. Do the centuries weigh so heavily that you cannot recall the arenas, the glorious spectacles where Ubani paraded his champion for the amusement of the elite? I was there, in the stands, when you, barehanded and half-starved, ripped the throat from a ravening beast 4 times your size. A victory still whispered among my people centuries later. A triumph of raw savagery over engineered perfection." The alien gestured toward the massive teleporter console. Ubani was a creature of habit. He had several sanctuaries he would always return to. The world of his favored champion was chief among them. Provide the planetary address to the system, and a gate will very likely open for us. Kriak's jaw tightened. "I don't know it." "Your blood remembers," Zarok replied calmly. "A single drop of your crimson life force would be sufficient to pave the map. The encoded memory lies dormant within you." Aldrich snapped, stepping forward with sword raised. "If that were true, why didn't you simply drain him while he was your prisoner?" Zarok ignored the knight entirely, eyes locked on Kriakk. At Kriak's curt nod, the alien continued. "Ubani performed incredible modifications on you at the molecular level. Your blood is locked. The information is encrypted deep within your DNA. It can only be accessed from a willing donor. I implore you, champion, help us find him. Help us bring order back to what he fractured." Kriak's face remained stone. "No." Zarok's slit mouth twitched. Then the alien screamed, a piercing telepathic shriek that stabbed directly into their brains like needles of ice and fire. Kriakk, Aldrich, and the others clutched their heads in agony, ears ringing, vision blurring. Kriakk fought through the pain, lunged to the console, and slammed in a random set of coordinates. He then grabbed a fallen lizard soldier's broken body and hurled it with all his strength. The corpse slammed into Zarok, knocking the frail, non-combatant alien backward. More robots and lizard troops flooded the chamber. The fight turned savage once again. Kriakk hacked and smashed with brutal efficiency, severing limbs and crushing skulls. Aldrich, and the two remaining knights fought at his side, steel clashing against metal and scale. Blue blood and oil sprayed across the floor. While the battle raged, Zarok recovered, slinking along the edge of the room. The alien's large eyes flicked rapidly across the control panel, reading the coordinates Kriakk had entered. A thin, satisfied smile stretched its slit mouth. Zarok turned and fled the chamber through a side exit. Kriakk roared and started after him, only for a lizard soldier to appear behind him, energy blade raised for a killing strike. Aldrich shoved Kriakk hard, taking the blow across his shoulder. Armor sparked and tore. The knight grunted in pain but spun, driving his sword through the attacker's chest and slamming the body into the console. The impact smashed controls and altered the coordinates with a burst of sparks. Air began to rush violently toward the portal. Kriak's eyes widened. The ring had activated. Instead of a planet, it showed the cold, starless void of deep space. The portal was now a hungry maw pulling everything toward it. Dead bodies, broken robots, and loose debris began sliding across the floor and flying into the nothingness. Aldrich, wounded and off balance, started to pitch forward into the suction. Kriakk lunged, grabbing his comrade's arm with one hand while seizing a reinforced railing with the other. The wind howled around them as the void drank everything in. The suction howled like a living thing, hungry for everything in the chamber. Kriakk hauled Aldrich back with raw strength, slamming the big knight against the reinforced railing. "Hold on," he bellowed. Aldrich gripped the rail with bloodied gauntlets, teeth clenched. Kriakk released him and let the pull take him. He slid and tumbled across the tilting floor toward the console, grabbing it at the last moment. His eyes scanned the flickering display, power levels critically low. Only enough for one final activation. He punched in new coordinates with brutal, precise strikes. The portal ring shimmered and changed. The void vanished, replaced by a lush, steaming jungle, ancient trees draped in vines, distant roars of massive beasts, and thick mist rolling across the canopy. Aldrich steadied himself, staring at the carnage around them. All his men, his brothers in arms, were gone, dead, or already sucked into the void. He looked at Kriakk, a flicker of doubt crossing his face. Was it worth it? "Is that your home?" he asked. Kriakk shook his head. "No. Through there is a world of myth and legend. Strong, feral beasts. Men like you. Warriors born for battle. Kingdoms that would make your hollow look like a dirt hovel. Magic and technology are both scarce. Yet that world feels more advanced than this one, in the ways that matter." Aldrich lowered his head, overwhelmed. In the span of a single desperate mission, he had seen aliens, machines that walked like men, talking dragons, and doorways between dimensions. It was too much. Kriakk turned toward the portal. "I have to go. If you wish to come, you are welcome." Aldrich hesitated, then extended his arm. "There is a town that needs its knight. I cannot abandon them." Kriakk clasped the knight's forearm in the old warrior's grip. The two men nodded to one another, a silent acknowledgement forged in blood and fire. "Thank you," Kriakk said. The words felt strange and heavy on his tongue. Aldrich nodded once. "This facility should fall permanently." "I'll see it done," Aldrich replied grimly. Kriakk released his grip and stepped through the swirling portal without looking back. The ring powered down behind him with a dying whine, leaving Aldrich alone in the ruined chamber. Zarok slammed open the doors to a hangar bay, long, bony fingers curled into fists. The frail alien stomped across the deck in pure psionic fury, a telepathic scream echoing through the minds of any crew unfortunate enough to be nearby. He boarded his sleek, angular ship, claws stabbing at the controls. The vessel lifted off and shot into open space. He had traveled only a short distance when another portal appeared, floating lazily in the void. Around it drifted the frozen corpses, lizard soldiers, broken robots, and the armored bodies of Aldrich's knights, tumbling silently like macabre ice sculptures. Zarok's eyes narrowed. He recalled the coordinates Kriakk had entered and activated the portal from his ship. The ring flared to life. He flew through. The other side was not the jungle. Ancient, menacing warships materialized around his vessel immediately. Dark, angular hulls bristling with weapons. His ship's system screamed warnings as targeting locks lit up the console. A communication channel forced itself open. A deep, unsettling alien voice boomed through the bridge. "You have crossed into Metalon space. Power down your ship and prepare to be boarded." Zarok scoffed, a bitter, hateful sound. He leaned back in his seat, long neck curving in defeat and reluctant admiration. "Well played, caveman," he hissed to himself. Well played. Kriakk stepped out of the portal into humid jungle air thick with the scent of rot, flowers, and predator musk. The moment he cleared the threshold, the ancient SI ring behind him flickered and died, overgrown with moss and thick vines, as if it had stood there for centuries. He turned, looking at the ruined gate, and smiled. A slow, savage, hungry smile. This was a world he knew. A world of brutal strength and ancient rivalries. A world where, given enough time, Basin would come for him. This was going to be fun.